Welcome everyone to our Tech Excellence meetup. Our vision is to raise the bar of technical excellence across the world. And this is our team of organizers. So I just want to say thanks a lot to Daniel and Oliver for joining me as co-organizers for Tech Excellence. The following are some of our past speakers, as well as current speakers. And also you can join us on Meetup, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. And also if you have any technical questions, you can check out our GitHub page. And also thanks to our sponsor Optivem and our partner QE Unit. So today I'm really happy that Ariel Pérez is joining us. So he is VP of Engineering, Measurement and Learning at Split Software. And the topic for today is engineering leaders creating a culture of technical excellence. So I'm really looking forward to this one.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the introduction, Valentina. Very happy to be here with this group. Just please let me know if you can see the slides. Everything looks good so far?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Awesome. So again, thank you very much for having me here. Again, as Valentina said, the talk is engineering leaders, creating a culture of tech excellence. And my name is Ariel Pérez. This talk might be a little different than other talks you might have heard because I actually won't be diving too much into technology itself and more about and more into instead, what are the things that as leaders are important to help foster a culture where technical excellence can actually thrive. So most of this talk will be primarily about you as leaders, and those of you in the audience as leaders or aspiring to be leaders. The things that I've seen in my career and that I've learned throughout my career, and that have come up, that out of my experiences, really resonated and stood out as the most important things that I find when it came to building that culture, that necessary culture, and that necessary environment for technical excellence. So hopefully you'll all get a lot out of this. So a little bit about me to start. As Valentina said, I'm currently the VP of Engineering for Measurement and Learning at Split Software. And what does that mean? Well, Split Software is a feature flagging and experimentation platform. And as the VP of Engineering for Measurement and Learning, I'm responsible for the part of the organization from an engineering perspective that handles all the bits around how do we measure the impact of every feature, how do we learn from every single feature, whether that be experimentation, a version of analytics, observability, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's my current role, and I've been there for about 6 months now. But a little more about just a quick recap of my entire experience and how that got me to where I am today. So I have about 2 decades of experience in this industry and building software, delivering technology solutions. And that spans many, many areas. And I'll go through these in a bit. So about 20 years of doing this. I've learned quite a bit along the way. 15 years of actually building and leading teams. So interestingly enough, early in my career, I started to get a taste for what it means to lead teams and then start building teams, whether it's hiring, putting people together, and trying to find the right mix, and then guiding folks in the direction where we have to go, and how do we get people inspired. Throughout my career, actually, I've always worked with actually often very globally distributed teams, teams as far out as India or in parts of Asia, teams in Europe, teams in the UK, in Latin America, and obviously throughout different areas of the US. So I've gotten to get a diverse set of perspectives on teams across time zones, across areas, across cultures. And that actually, feeds in a lot of ideas in terms of what are the nuances for us to be careful about and be concerned with. I've worked at every level of company, down from all the way up to the massive enterprises, big companies with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees, all the way down to small startups, whether my own startup or even other startups that I've been a part of. And I've had a combination of both. Beyond being an employee at a company, I've also done consulting on small projects, consulting on technology and building things, and also I've had a taste of entrepreneurship as well, having built my own company at some point in the past. And I've worked in both product and engineering, wearing the product hat, understanding the strategy, where we're going, why we're doing this, what problem we're aiming to solve, the viability of this, and really diving deep into building something that people want to pay for. And obviously the other side of it, like, well, how do we build it? What's the right way to build it? What does it mean to have the right way to build it? So a lot of experience actually shifting between both roles. And lastly, in terms of the types of technologies and areas I've been everywhere from mobile, all across the front end, all across the back end, and in big data. And this is all just the application side of things, but I've also been able to see the entire stack. So thankfully, I've been blessed to have the opportunity to see a wide array of technologies and solutions and engineering throughout my career. So some things I've learned along the way. One of them is, it's extremely important to stay curious, and I'll dive deeper into what it means to stay curious. But it's a part of always learn, always look for learning, always aim to feel uncomfortable, and get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's how we grow, and it's an important part of leading others when it comes to like basically emulating these particular behaviors in yourself. So we'll dive into that in a little bit. The second thing that I think I've learned along the way, it's that it's extremely important to always keep your development and delivery skills sharp, right? So it's not just developing and not just hands-on, not just the technology aspect, but how do we deliver this stuff? How do we ship this stuff? How do we get really good at actually delivering solutions that actually deliver value and put them in the hands of our customers and users? And lastly, at the end of the day, it's all about people. We can talk about technology all day. We can talk about the most amazing technologies, the most amazing skills. We can talk about TDD and clean architecture, about test first, test last. But none of that matters, honestly, unless you actually understand people. And the idea is how to work with people and what's important for people. And especially as a leader, how do you put the people first? Everything else actually follows from that. So starting out into, let's delve into these some more, right? So, stay curious. What do I mean by that? One of the areas that's really important, especially, and it's interesting as technology leaders, staying curious about business. And what do I mean by that? We are in this privileged positions as technologists that generally we can work anywhere, right? Almost every company, every industry, every business, almost every institution needs technology solutions, especially as more and more of the world gets digitized. So we're in this unique position that we can work anywhere. But that doesn't mean that we only focus on technology wherever we are. It's extremely important to have a really good, solid understanding of the business you're in. In many ways, not only does that actually help you get more motivated and inspired about where you're working on, if you're actually passionate about the business that you're in, it also really massively helps in two other areas. One, coming up with better solutions, better ideas on what do we need to deliver, how do we deliver it, what's important, what's not important. So really having a strong understanding of your business is critical, and staying curious about that is critical. But the other side of that is, especially as a leader in the technology space, how you provide context for your teams. And it's very hard to provide context without actually understanding your business. Why are we doing this right now? Why this? Why not that? That's a very important, constant question. And I'll follow that up with product, right? Often, we think about, well, it's not my job. I'm the engineering leader. I'm the engineering manager. I focus on my team, how we build it, the architecture, the technical design, the technical specs, and the product owner handles all the product stuff. And I think in many ways that division that we've created does us a disservice as engineering leaders, as technology leaders, because I think understanding the business is extremely important. Understanding your product very deeply only helps you, at the minimum, helps you create much better solutions, right? Tailored to the problem at hand that you're trying to solve. Getting a deep understanding of your product then becomes very critical. Yet again, context for your teams. But on the other side, sometimes being able to actually challenge your product owner or your product manager, your product PR on, is that the right thing? Are you sure that's the right thing? I actually understand this product. I've been learning it with you. Can we be spending our time somewhere else? Is this the best place for us to spend your time? And actually keep that allows you to keep each other accountable, right? On the way you're spending your team's time, because that's the most important piece of it. That's the most important aspect. Where does your team spend your time? Because you want to make sure you're focusing on the most important thing. Sometimes that might be a product feature, but sometimes that might be technical debt, which is often a big challenge, right? As technology leaders, how do we talk about technical debt in product terms? And if you can't understand your product, it's very difficult for you to talk about technical debt in relation to the product and what's the right technical debt to attack and when to attack it. If you can't turn that into which metric is that going to move, which product features is that going to help with. So learn about your products. It's extremely important. Stay curious about your products. Strategy. I think that's very tied again to business and product, right? Long term, we talk a lot about roadmaps, and I think we can fall down this idea of give me a plan and what's the plan and what's the roadmap, what are all the features. But when you step back for a second, there's a big high level idea that you want to get at is, well, what is our strategy? If there's a set of problems that we've agreed that we want to solve, the strategy is almost a high level map of, well, how do we think we're going to get there? We solve this kind of problem first, and then this kind of problem, and then that kind of problem because A, B, and C. Because that's actually going to be the best way for us to get there. It's going to give us the most value early on. It's going to unlock more things in the future. So thinking about strategy and strategizing is unbelievably important. It's a way to really help create a strong vision for your team. And strategy is very closely tied to vision and mission for your team to understand where we're going, why we're going there. As long as they can understand the strategy, gives them a lot of wiggle room within that strategy to come up with the best solutions, with the best technology applications, with the best products, and also think about how to ensure that how technical excellence fits within that strategy. The next outline is actually there's a bit of understanding marketing, and not really marketing because you want to sell your product, right? Or help sell the product. It's critical to understand how customers in the market perceive your solutions and your products, and helping get an understanding of that marketing also helps you understand the right solutions to solve. Because in many ways, it's what resonates with your customers, what resonates with your users. Marketing really helps with that, right? Helps you think, flex that muscle and practice that muscle of what are the right words? What are the right words to use? The wrong words to use? What are the right topics that people discuss about? I might think about it this way, but our customers are thinking about it that way. How do we then make those two things match? And at the end of the day, how do we feed that back to our own engineering teams, our own technology teams, our own product teams to make sure that what we're building aligns with the way our customers see it and perceive it in the market? And this one is completely different, but there's an aspect of, I think history, just history in general, where there's history of the world, where there's history of your industry, history of product, history of technology, um, history of war, right? There's so many things that we can learn about past experiences, and just there's so much we can learn from other things people have done, people have tried, where people have failed, right? Obviously, I think life is a very, very I forgot the word. There's an exact quote about life is a very harsh teacher, right? It kind of like teaches you the lesson by making you fail first, and then only afterward until it tries to explain the lesson. Obviously, I butchered the quote, but it's something like that. So yes, we've got experienced life to really learn, but there's a lot of other people who've experienced life and learned, and becoming a student of history can be very valuable and really helpful in this journey. Lastly, well, look, it's not actually not. I think this is the last one. Yes, it's not just about like history and all. We're thinking about very quote unquote hard things here, and very skills based things, and business skills, but there's a big aspect of music, art, sport, creative endeavors that force you to use more than just your brain for hardcore technical things. And the big piece here is primarily because it expands your mind. It allows you to look at problems from multiple dimensions, whether it's a technical problem or a people problem, or it's about how do we have teams and build teams, and how do we work toward a goal. There's so many things that we do today in our industry in terms of how we work that actually come from sports and analogies in sports. So being curious about music, art, sport, and more things than just the quote unquote hard skills, the business skills, the tech skills, allows your mind to expand, and it helps you really become a sponge for really very quickly picking up new concepts. And more importantly, how do you apply those concepts to the problems at hand, which, like I said, often is more people than technology. So on the second part, cool. This is the part that we're all very comfortable with, like keeping your development and delivery skills sharp. So what do I mean by that? On one side, obviously learning programming languages, learning many programming languages. I think it's just practice and understanding which things are similar to others, which things have some patterns in this language and that pattern, or some functional, or some OOP, or some declarative, or some imperative. Getting a broad view of different programming languages and how they work and how they differ or how they're similar really helps you understand, especially as a technology leader, what your teams are going through, how they're coding, why they're maybe having a challenge implementing something that to you makes sense in .NET, but maybe might not make sense in Erlang, right? So the ability to see different languages allows you to see and get comfortable with the idea of there are different ways to do things in different languages, and it just gives you much more vocabulary to just like any, spoken language, much more vocabulary to use, a richer set of vocabulary to use, especially with your teams. The second part is, I think as you grow in your career, is having broadening your understanding of systems and architecture. I'm not saying become an architect, right? But at the end of the day, almost everything we ship, everything we deliver is part of a system. And helping understand how that system works, how that system interplays, and what are, when you touch something and move something on one side of the system, what happens on the other side? These intricate patterns of interrelation and interconnectedness and interactions in the system is unbelievably important. So having a systems level view of things really helps you, especially as a leader. And again, this is all about providing context for your team, but also helping refine solutions, come up with better solutions. So having a good knowledge of the whole stack, you can be very deep in, I'm an amazing, Spring Boot Java microservices developer. That's great, right? And it's awesome. You need that depth. But at some point, especially as a leader, it's really, really important for you to build that muscle and build that actual skill set to have a broader view. Well, Spring Boot microservice by itself will do nothing. I need a way to connect to it. I need a way to get to it. At some point, there's got to be some actor, some user outside of the system that needs to interact with that microservice to get value. How much do you know when it comes to how do I put this out in the chain? What's everything in the chain? Are there ELBs? Are there load balancers? Is there CDN? Are there service meshes? How do databases interact? How do all these things connect? The broader your knowledge in these things, the wider your knowledge, the more you can actually speak about it and actually have a view and opinion. Or more importantly, you can ask your team the right questions because you've seen more of this stuff. Obviously, and this is the right place for it, right? Clean code, understanding what it means to have clean code. And I'm not saying about being dogmatic about how we code, but clean code, the patterns that we, what does it mean to have clean code? How do you promulgate these practices? How do you help your team understand the importance of clean code, the value of clean code, and what value it adds downstream? And connecting back to what I was saying earlier about business product strategy, this is a clean piece. Like, why do we spend time on clean code? Just ship it, right? I need to solve a customer problem. Understanding clean code, understanding very well, then, and the need for it helps you not only explain it to your team and get your team really understanding these practices, but also explain it to your business and product peers on why do we need to invest in time in this? Why now? Why is it important? How is it a business imperative to focus on clean code? Quality. And that's a broad umbrella, right? What do we mean by quality? At the end of the day, I think our customers, our users, our consumers expect our product to work, right? They expect our product not to be buggy. They expect it to be there when they need it. They have a job to be done, and a dependable product will allow them to actually perform that job. So there's so many ways that we can lose quality. It could be it crashes a lot in production. It means it's not scalable. It's not resilient. It might mean, further down, earlier in the chain, it might mean that it has a lot of bugs, a lot of small issues that crop up, in corner cases. So how do we ensure quality? How, what is important in quality? What's the right setup of my team? What are the things that I need to train my team on? Obviously, you could start at the base level of test-driven development, right? Whether it's test first or test last, and Valentina has a bunch of great articles on the implications of doing both. It's, well, why do we write tests? How do we help design code with tests, but also further on, how do we use the test to help us ensure the system and the code are exhibiting the behaviors we expected that we've defined? At what level do I test? What's the most effective way to test? Whether it's at the unit level, at the integration level, at the ETE level. Do I need contract tests? When do I use those? When do I use other ones? Do I use tap compare testing, right? Do I use chaos testing, right? So there's so many different kinds of testing that we can apply. At the end of the day, especially for engineering teams, and we think about technical excellence, is what are the tests that I need to ensure that I can safely modify this system? Because I don't know about you, but I've probably never worked on a system that I never touched again. So when it comes to quality, at least one of the ways I look at it is, how do I train myself as a leader to really have these conversations with my team and help guide them on what's the most important thing? You know what? How do you feel confident every single time you're making change that you didn't break anything? That's the first place I want to start. Confidence. Whether that's an E2E test, an int test, or unit test, you as an engineer tell me what you need so that you can type and implement that change and feel confident that you didn't break anything. That might be very broad, right? That involves then CI/CD. It involves testing in production, monitoring, observability. So quality as a whole is a bunch of practices, but at the end of the day, what allows me to ship faster, ship more often, and do it safely? In that vein, I'll talk a little about DORA and the DORA metrics, right? Like those 4 metrics. And I think it's very important for you to become very, very well versed especially as a leader, when you're talking to your teams and guiding your teams, but also talking to your peers and your product partners, your business partners, the importance of the DORA metrics and how do we measure them and how do we continually improve on them. And for those that are not, are not familiar with the DORA metrics, there are 4 of them. And these metrics were found by a group of researchers when they were looking at what do the top teams do? What are the, what are the capabilities and the practices that the top teams regularly do and are really good at? So there were four dimensions. One of them is deployment frequency. The top teams deploy often, right? And I've seen conversations on threads that we've had on the question of what is continuous integration, what is continuous delivery, what is continuous deployment. At the end of the day, all those bundled into there is like the top teams deploy more frequently. The top teams can deploy on demand. So it's a question there, how do I get our team to really think about that ability to deploy frequently? The second one is the lead time for changes. And it's, well, from the time I coded something and I created my first commit, how quickly can we get that to prod? How quickly can we get that in front of customers? So the top teams have a short lead time for changes, which not only does it become important from a delivering business value perspective, right? The most responsive company actually can attain that customer value, capture that customer value first. But there's the other side of it. When there's a problem, when something explodes, how quickly can we fix it and put out a fix? Very important lead time. The third one is the change failure rate. So this is great, deploy often, but it doesn't really matter if you're deploying often if every time you're breaking production, if you have a failed deployment. So the change failure rate is almost like a guardrail for the deployment frequency. How often are your deployments failing? And you can actually take that as narrow as you want or as broadly as you want. You're thinking about, did I have an immediate rollback in that deployment? Was there an issue with the deployment that it couldn't complete the deployment? That might be the most narrow version of it. But as you become more mature, you start thinking about, well, did we have any incidents in production, any major incidents in production issues that we can trace back to a deployment? Well, that's a failed deployment as well. You also can expand it even more as timelines allow an issue, a production problem, unavailability, lack of availability, production outage that you can trace back to a deployment from a week ago. That's also part of the change failure rate. So it's, of all your changes, of all your deployments, what percentage of them had an issue, had a problem? The best teams actually keep that number very low. And the last one is our mean time to recover, right? And the mean time to recover is just from the point that something happened, a problem occurred, how long did it take us to recover? Depending on your practices, right? That really talks to on your mean time to detect. And to improve your mean time to detect, observability, monitoring, alerting, and production, extremely critical. That SRE practice and skill, unbelievably important to embed and build in your teams. But also, are you using things like feature flags? Are you using controlled mechanisms to control your rollout? Are you measuring and monitoring everything that's happening? And do you have the ability to quickly fix it? So all those practices, fit into that bucket of when something happens, how quickly can we recover? And that's the fourth one. So an important understanding and really diving deep into these, measuring these with your teams and helping your teams look at all of these and say, how do we improve these is massive for you as a technology leader. And this is why I said not as much about development, but there's also a delivery aspect. How do you really keep your development delivery skills sharp? Definitely don't want to jump into a religious war about Agile, what Agile means, which Agile practice. Are we talking about Scrum or Kanban or SAFe? Or are we talking about less or talking about XP? And important, you especially as a technology leader, really understanding the principles of Agile and what it means to be Agile and what's necessary, preconditions to actually be Agile, which at a high level really is how responsive to change are you? Because at the end of the day, that's one of the only constant in our industry. There's always going to be change. So how adaptable are you to being able to ingest change, adapt to change, and be responsive to that change? And that's why you as a leader become a student of Agile, or would be useful to become a student of Agile, so you can think about how to apply those practices to your team, to how you work, to how you organize, to how you actually ship, how you get together to ship and manage and run and continuously ship. Becoming a student of Agile is unbelievably important for you as a technology leader. And on the other side, I'll add lean into it. Not the idea of lean startup. That's huge, right? Build, validate, learn. But the idea of lean waste. What are the things that are waste in your system? And looking at a lot of these technical concepts, often they boil down to waste. How often are your teams waiting for someone, waiting for something? Are they waiting for a PR review, right? Are they waiting for a CI pipeline to complete? Are we waiting for product managers to answer a question? all those things are sources of waste. And if you ever pay attention to your teams, what do people often do when they're waiting? They context switch and do something else. And obviously, in many ways, we want to avoid context switching. It becomes very hard to really get something done deeply. And actually, it makes it really easy for your teams to get very frustrated and challenged. They're constantly context switching. So becoming a student of Agile and Lean, unbelievably important for you as a technology leader. And the reason I dove into this section about technology, right, the things that I've found that become very useful is, especially as a technology leader, not a manager, right, but a technology leader, it provides you quite a bit of credibility with your team, right? When you have a technology leader and think about in your experiences that you really trusted, like, oh my God, not only are, do they know the strategy, do they know the business, do they know how to lead a team? Like they know their stuff. I can really talk to them about my Kafka issue. I can talk to them about, the issue I'm facing in Mongo or the problem I'm having in React. My leader gets me and they can have the conversation with me. It's the credibility that it builds with your team, which then engenders a lot of trust. And I'll dive into that part, next in terms of the people aspect of this. But these are the foundations to even start the people aspect. Lastly, as I've said before, it literally is all about the people. And what do I mean by that, right? The first part is a big part of your teams and your people and how they work and how they do their best work is about finding intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation is a key piece of that, right? It's not money, right? That's extrinsic. Money, title, accolades, those are all external motivators. And after a certain point, there's not much more money you can throw at someone to make them more motivated. Up to a certain level, yes, it becomes a detractor, but after that, it doesn't really increase motivation. So what actually really builds motivation, what creates a lot of internal strong motivation, there's basically three things. There's an ability to work with autonomy, right? And what are the things that you can put in place, whether it's training people, educating people, making them a lot more comfortable, making them experts in their space, but also allowing them to make decisions, own their work. Autonomy is massive when it comes to motivation. I can imagine with many of you, but also the teams that you lead, the times that the team really ran forward and charged at something was when they felt they owned their decisions, that they didn't have someone telling them what to do, and especially not how to do it, which is the other part. The second part is mastery, right? People seek mastery. People want to be really strong, but they want to be experts in their space, in their thing, whatever it might be. It might be, I want to be the best, Spring Boot developer in the world, the best microservices developer. I want to be the best architect. I want to be the best product engineer for this product. Whatever that is how do you foster the ability to allow them to build mastery, whether it's you provide space for training, space for collaboration, conversations, ability to step back and really learn your craft and hone your craft. Mastery is massive for building motivation. And the third one is purpose. So autonomy, mastery, purpose. People really get very engaged and motivated when they have a sense of purpose, right? And this goes back to what I was talking about in the first set of things on how do you provide context? How do you provide vision and strategy? Those things go a very long way in imbuing a sense of purpose in your team. And the people like, I'm doing this because I believe in the mission and I really believe I'm solving something big and I'm aligned. So when you provide your people with autonomy, mastery, and purpose, it's amazing the things that they can do because that really ratchets up the intrinsic motivation on why they're doing things. The next thing is really psychological safety is critical, absolutely crucial in any space. And what is psychological safety? It's the ability to understand and feel that the team, the boss, the company has my back, right? That I can actually try things and fail, and I'll be supported in that, right? Because at the end of the day, we often learn through failure. Um, and I can try things, and if I fail, I'm not going to get fired, right? And if I get it wrong, that it's not the end of the world. How do I have a group of people around me that support me in this endeavor? That allows you, your team and your people to really take many more chances to try more things. It's amazing how it unleashes their spirit when they have that ability to try things and feel that if they fail, they're going to be covered. But on the other side, also gets them to speak up more, gets them very comfortable to challenge the status quo, to challenge you as a leader. And you have to be very comfortable as a leader and ready to be challenged by your people. You actually should relish it and look for it, right? Because that's the way the best ideas come out. Getting your people to speak up, but they won't speak up if they feel they're going to be reprimanded or get in trouble or fired if they open their mouth, right? If they speak their mind. You want to make them to feel safe. Emotional intelligence, it's massive, not just for your people actually, but for you as a leader, right? Several studies have found that it doesn't matter how smart you are, how high your IQ is, the much closer correlation to actual performance and improved performance. Hi, sweetheart, you can sit with me. Um, the highest correlation to like people who perform the best and have amazing performance is actually people with higher EQ, higher emotional intelligence. So it's not always the smartest person in the room; it's the person who can understand emotions, who can understand and read other people, understand social situations and psychological situations, understand their own social situations, psychological situations, and can really leverage that and use that, right? Hold on. So that's massive. So building your own emotional intelligence, your ability to read people, understand yourself, absolutely critical in any role as a leader. Feedback, getting very comfortable with feedback, both receiving, asking for feedback, right? That's the only way we improve, right? What things am I doing really well? Great, let's double that up. Let's really, dive deep on that. But what are the things I'm not doing well or not doing so well? And more importantly, how's that impacting my work and my people and others? Getting very comfortable with that idea of constantly looking for feedback, finding feedback from every direction is critical, but also how to provide feedback. As a leader, your teams are looking for this. They're looking for, how do I improve? How do I get better? What am I doing well? What am I not doing well? So really creating time for feedback and providing effective feedback, critical and necessary. Related to feedback, I think one of your biggest jobs as a leader, and how to get really good at building an amazing team, is getting comfortable with coaching, right? And I think for many of you and myself, this is a challenge, it's a constant challenge. I've built up a lot of experience over time, and I kind of know a lot of stuff. Sometimes when I'm working with my team, it's like, this is the answer. Do this. I know it is. Let's save some time. Just do this. The problem with that is, one, you take away their agency and their autonomy, but you also take away their ability to learn. So it's an important practice to get very comfortable to help your teams get to the answer, because many of them have it and they'll have it. And if they're not, they will learn through it. So it's the same idea as, like, give a man a fish, they'll eat for a day. Teach them to fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. um, how do you teach your team to fish? And it's all through coaching. How do you help them to understand the problem? How do you help them understand the things they've tried and look at all the things they've tried, help work them through what things might you try, and then figure out the way forward, right? So getting really good at coaching, critical and important. And the last thing I'll talk about is this thing called ikigai. It's this Japanese philosophy, if I'm not mistaken, about, how do you find fulfillment in your career and in life. And it's one of the things that really helps me in my own career, but also when I'm looking and speaking to my people. Um, there's four aspects, I think, to fulfillment, and if you get all four, like, you're golden, you're in the right spot. But if you get three, you're actually still in a pretty good spot. And it's basically four dimensions on what you look at it like. What am I supposed to be doing in life? What is my purpose in life, right? And this is, again, massively motivating. Number one, what am I good at, right? Can I find the things that I'm very good at? And it's important for you to look at that, but also look at your people. Can you figure out what you're good at, right? And let's think through, and I'll help you find out also what you're good at, and let's look at your peers. The second thing is, at the end of the day, what can I get paid for, right? What do other people value enough to pay me for it? So let's look at that and see if that overlaps with what I'm good at. What do I love doing? What do I get excitement out of, motivation out of? What do I get really fulfilled with when I do this thing, right? What do I like doing? What do I love doing, right? If you have all three of these, you're actually doing awesome, right? You are good at this stuff, people pay for it, and you love doing it. Like, you've found that golden role. um, but the last piece of Ikigai is saying, well, what does the world need? And it's one of the things that really helps you find ultimate purpose. I'm like, am I doing something the world needs, right? I'm going to make a judgment call and judge people while not judging. But for example, how many people actually feel great when they say they work for a tobacco company, right? Like, yeah, I might be good at this. I'm a marketer at a tobacco company. I get paid well. I love doing this, and I'm really good at it. But does the world need this? Might work, might not work. Only takes you so long. So when it comes to that conversation of finding those four dimensions, and you have those conversations with your teams, it's amazing how you can figure out the best place to position them, the best place to help them find where they should be. Sometimes it means not in your own company, especially if your company isn't big enough. It doesn't make it really easy to move around. So it's an important conversation to regularly have, not only with yourself, but with your people. And the last piece I'll talk about, which isn't the three things I mentioned, is taking a lot of these principles and things that I've learned and I've seen that really helps the team really exhibit technical excellence. Is how do you set them up for success? And there's a few practices that I think are extremely important. And for some of the folks here, I think, like Oliver, as an XP practitioner, these things might actually sound familiar. One of them, and this is why I went back to the business and the product and the strategy and the marketing and the technology, is like you you need to provide your team with alignment and context, right? If they know why we're doing things, if they know where we're going, if they know why is this important, why is this important right now, it gives them a lot of leeway and flexibility to be creative because they know where they're going and they can be a lot more autonomous. So alignment, constant alignment, and understanding the context, crucial to ensuring that your teams can run on their own and exhibit and build and create their best qualities, their best skills, their best work. This is just, another way to say limit your work in progress, right? Start less, finish more. um, I think, we as an industry, and actually just professionals in any industry, I think have gotten very carried away by the ideas of Taylorism, which came from about 100 years ago on manufacturing and factories and factory processes, right? Which all focus really hard on ROI and productivity and efficiency. And that's been the management style that we apply to everything, right? Let's do more things in parallels. You're really efficient at doing these things. Let's do max utilization of resources so we can get every last dollar, pound, pence out of every single resource. And let's improve the productivity, increase my ROI. Let's get more things done. The problem with all those approaches is that you might be getting the wrong things done. So one of the things that's really important to me is more effectiveness. Are we effective? A key way to be effective, which means you're getting the right things done. A big crucial part of it is actually start less and finish more. It allows heavy focus, looking in and going deep and getting something completely done before you start the next thing. It sounds so counterintuitive, but even mathematically, when you look at flow and throughput, one of the massive ways to improve flow is to actually do less things. You'll actually get more done. Um, Another key thing, and again, this might be controversial to some people. Like, look, I don't work well. Like, I like working independently. Is the idea of swarming, mobbing, and ensembles, right? And I'm not even just talking about mob programming or ensemble programming. I'm talking about involving the entire team in solving a problem. Again, in this idea from the previous one, we talk about efficiency and productivity. We tend to separate very fast, right? For those who do Scrum, right, start stand up. How many of your teams start the stand up and say, "Great, we've got 5 stories. 5 engineers go do 5 stories all at once." You're losing one of the most valuable resources that you have, which is each other. People are working on things independently, individually, and then they have to sync and then they have to catch up. So now you have wasted time. And I talked about lean before. We have to sync up again. We have to catch up. We have to do a PR review with no context. If we get really good at giving our teams the opportunity and actually pushing them toward work together, solve this problem together, you find that you actually not only accelerate learning, but also come up with much better solutions, much more complete solutions. So hopefully you don't actually have to go back and work on it again. So I think this ability to let's tackle problems together as a team is, I think, unbelievably important when it comes to leading teams and thinking about how we work and how we do things. And obviously, I can't get away from this talk without talking about technical excellence, right? And technical excellence underpins many of these things. What are the things that allow you to go fast? What are the things that allow you to solve a problem once? What are the things that allow you to actually have reduced frustration, deliver value regularly, incrementally, and on a constant and consistent basis is a very strong foundation in technical excellence. And that can mean a lot of things, right? But in many ways, like, do we have clean coding principles? How do we think about testing and designing? How do we think about working together? How do we think about quality, observability, monitoring? Um, the door, how good am I at the door metrics? And the door metrics showing that we're doing well. So a strong foundation in technical excellence is absolutely essential to building any kind of amazing team that really runs and flies when you unleash them and give them the space to be unleashed. With that said, thank you. At this point, I'm open to any questions. I went through a lot. I spoke fast, but many topics there, and I really invite at this point like a conversation on this.
Wow, this was a really, really excellent talk up to now. So whoever has any questions, feel free to add them in the chat. I think now perhaps Oliver and me could also start with some questions, and later also if we get questions from the chat, we will add them. So one question from my side is, it's great how you mentioned both the business perspectives and the technical perspectives. Now, it can sometimes happen that there's a clash in terms of understanding of quality. that someone from engineering might say, we should have clean code, we should, do things properly, follow best practices, do, test automation. It can then also happen that the development team might say, oh, if we do unit testing, that's like 30% additional time, is a really common sentence that at least I've heard. And then people from the business, when they hear that, then they say, we don't want that 30% extra time. Let's just cut it off. Quality is some additional cost. And then what happens is that team, during the first few sprints, things are sort of fine, and then they start experiencing slowdown, and then it reaches a point that like half of the sprint or something is spent with bug fixes, and then in the end, like after a year, everyone says, oh, we are in a really bad position, we now have to do like a complete rewrite. And then again, there will also be issues from business side, who will now say, what you're now asking for budget for rewrite. So here we've had two cases, both initially where there was like clash, quality costs more, so no, we don't want you to do quality. And then later, when it starts getting really bad, where again there can be issues in getting some support. I'm interested to hear, these are situations which I've heard from many teams over the years and I've experienced as well. I'm interested in your experiences in that, and also the mechanisms which you've used in communication in those kinds of situations.
Definitely. So a lot of things here. I think the first one is to recognize, I think, coming back to people, regardless of what your role is, what position you're in, as a species, we're really bad at long-term things. We cannot categorize, and we cannot definitely not calculate the impact of things that are far away. We just can't do it. It's impossible. Again, there's like global warming, right? We're like a frog in a boiling pot, and we won't know until we're cooked that we're cooking, right? And it's a challenge. So, and that applies in everything we do, not just trying to save the planet, but even in the work we do. So it's very hard for whether it's a business executive or a tech team to talk about, this thing's going to happen in 6 months if we don't invest now, or this is going to happen in a year if we don't invest now. And even if we could have that conversation, on the other side, certain people actually are just so focused on the short term that it doesn't resonate. The conversation doesn't resonate, right? So I think one of the things that helps is, one, when we talked about you building out your technical foundations as a leader, is your whole question and conversation about unit testing takes 40% more time. Is like, well, is that really true, right? It's really good for you to educate yourself on that and actually practice it to really understand, is it really 40% more time? Or, does it depend on how you're unit testing, right? Are you unit testing the right way, right? One of the big things,
Yes.
and thank you, actually, you really opened up this conversation for me, and this idea thinking was, hey, if you unit test every class and every function, yes, you're going to have great quality code, but every time you change the code, now you're going to have to change your test. So obviously that feeling, crap, every time you change your code, you have to change your test. So I have to do twice the work. Why would I unit test? Like, well, you're not really unit testing the best way possible, right? The most effective way, and not efficient, the most effective way. So it's one, understanding the impact of unit testing, you internally, to have the conversation with your team on why you should do it. In reality, it will not be 40%, it'll be a lot less than that. But the conversation is always about, how does this accrue? And then this is where it becomes very important for you to have a question around accounting and understanding accounting. And what do I mean by accounting? One very important thing, the net present value of things, right? $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. By the inverse, $1,000 in 3 months is worth how much today? And that's the conversation you start having with your business partners. And especially as a technologist, it really helps. Hey, you want me to build this feature, and great, I can ship it in a month, and I'm gonna create all this technical debt. And how much value are we gonna accrue if we ship that in a month, right? Obviously, it matters. The sooner you ship things to customers, the sooner you're gonna accrue value. Great. Here's the flip side of it. If I ship it this way, what's going to happen in 3 months, right? In 3 months, I have a 50% chance that we're going to have a production crash. How much value is that to you from a customer perspective? How many customers might we lose? In 6 months, if we keep going this way, I'm probably going to have a 95% chance of a catastrophic failure. What's that in reputation on brand? What does that do to our customers? How many customers will we lose? So do you want to lose 1,000 customers in 6 months or gain a customer in 1 month? Which one do you want, right? Let's think about that. Maybe we delay a little bit gaining that customer in 2 months, but I can get you much closer to the idea that you will not lose 1,000 customers in 6 months. So getting comfortable with those ideas of timeframes, bringing things to the present and talking about that one is very crucial. The second question, and it's something that we as technologists never really get trained to talk about, is technical debt. Technical debt is this amorphous thing, right? It's teams always build technical debt. And why are you always building technical debt? I'm like, well, you told me to ship faster, but I didn't tell you to give up quality. I'm like, actually, yes, you did. So technical debt will always exist. I've never seen ever in my career a team that doesn't have technical debt. And at some point, it's good to have technical debt, right? It allows you to learn faster. It allows you to ship faster. If you're shipping to learn, if you're shipping to validate, to confirm that this idea makes sense, I think there's more than enough stats out there that 95% of the stuff we ship has zero value or negative value. So obviously, if you ship fast to gain feedback, that's important. But then think about, great, I've got the feedback. How do I go from here based on that feedback? And what technical debt did I take on to get that feedback? At the end of the day, you want to build the ability to have a sustainable pace of growth. So one of the conversations I have when it comes to technical debt is, great, we have technical debt everywhere. We can't just stop and just solve all technical debt. But we can say, hey, business partner, you're saying we invest in this area and we're going to be building a bunch of features in this area. Well, here's all the technical debt underneath it. I can actually ship those features, and every feature is going to take me a month, and the next feature will take me 3 months, and the next one will take me 6 months. Or you let me take a month now, and every feature will take me 2 weeks, and the next one will take 2 weeks. Which of those do you want, right? Let's talk about that. How quickly can we accrue value? But I need you to be not short-sighted. I need you to think with me about the long term. What does it mean? So those are two big ways that I try to have that conversation.
This is excellent. The fact that you've brought net present value into this conversation, because that's how companies in general make decisions for other investments. And then that means essentially seeing this as a similar investment strategy. Just like a company might choose, will they go for this project or another project, depending on net present value. Here you are causing them to calculate net present value and to choose the option which has a maximal net present value. So that's a really great technique. And the other one that you've mentioned, which was that balance between, do we want to accelerate our, let's say, time to market now and gain one customer, what's the upside value of that, versus what's the downside that later we will lose 1,000 customers, or what's the loss of a customer. And this is where it gets really product and industry specific. So in certain more highly regulated industries, and especially with B2B customers, your loss of a customer is a huge loss that you can't afford. And then you have to be a bit more, how shall I say, sensitive towards quality. But maybe in some other industries, maybe in B2C or where there isn't that much of a stringent requirement for quality, like maybe if there's a new version of Twitter and it will not cause a business loss if, like, I don't know, the date is visible or not visible. It's very different compared to a financial or medical application going down. So it's different losses. So I really like how you framed that. You framed it in terms of business terms of financial impact. And the other part that I liked was that the emphasis on sustainability. So yeah, we can continue with the current technical debt, but things will get slower and slower and slower, like an avalanche. We can go that way, or we can change something so that we can go at a sustainable pace. So these are really, really excellent points. Now here, since we got,
can I add one more thing to that? Right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are the ideal ways to have this discussion, this conversation, and really put it in terms that your product and engineering part and business partners can understand, which is why it's so important for you to understand the product, the specific business. I'll give you the fallback parachute, right? Which I see many companies try because they just give up. It's, look, hey, this is all great. I need 20% time to fix tech debt. I don't care. Don't ask me about it. Don't question me. It's the way we maintain sustainability, and I can give you more than enough research and understanding on why that's important. So 20% of our time is not feature work; it's on tech debt work, right? And that is often one of the only ways we can get it through, right? But I think that's the fallback strategy, and if you
Yes.
aim for the prior ones, you can probably go a lot further and make those decisions as necessary.
Yes, well, the first one is a lot more powerful. It's more investment based, but the second one requires less cognitive involvement from the
Yeah,
stakeholder, and you just want them to say yes. And 20%, it's like not too much, like you're not asking for 80%.
yeah,
And people, and the analogy that can also be used is when we have buildings or cars or something, for everything we have regular maintenance. So
yeah.
then this might also be phrased as, well, we need, to just maintain something. Great points. So here, going on to the questions, as a leader, you will almost always have a boss, technical or not. So that's your boss, the
Yeah.
boss of the leader. What happens? I mean, maybe someone is a team lead or tech lead or engineering manager or whatever, and they have a boss. What happens if the boss is against some practice that you really believe will improve your product or team?
Yeah, I think this can happen very often, right? I'll put this back to understanding people. I think it's one of the ways it's important to really dive into that question, understanding with the boss, why are you against this practice? What is it about this that, in many ways, right, without telling them that they're scared, is like, what are you scared about? What are you afraid of, right? What do you think is going to happen? What's the worst that's going to happen? And often that's in their mind thinking about it. It might be that they have some experiences in the past and that's not going to work. Don't waste my time. But often it's potentially some deep rooted fear on like you're going to make them look bad and they don't want to bet the farm on you and you trying this new thing. So there's one aspect, understanding their motivations for being against it. Um, the second part is actually being really good against on that sense on like, here's the research, here's the background, here's the ideas, here's where it works, here's why it works. So selling the idea, right? Getting really good at selling and saying, we want to try this. Well, here's why. Here are all the things, right? At least you can never be over prepared for that conversation. But I think the third part of it, which often helps, is like, look, it's an experiment. We're just going to try something out. And here are the key criterias for this experiment. We're going to do this for this far, for this long, right? Because then that gives them at least a timeline and a deadline on when you're going to stop if it doesn't work. But it also helps you give them very clear criteria of things you're looking for that suggest, do we continue the experiment? Do we adjust the experiment? Do we stop the experiment? And potentially couching it in those terms can reduce their level of hesitation and anxiety and say, look, it's just an idea, it's a test. We're not going to change the whole way we work. And maybe I'm going to test it in a small area. So limiting the scope and the blast radius for how bad can it be and how bad can it go also makes it simpler for them to actually allow you to try new ideas.
Yeah, exactly. It's like trying to get a taste of something. It's a much smaller time investment, a much smaller resource investment, much smaller risk. So if they are afraid of something or risk averse, then it's just easier to get that alignment compared to saying, oh, we now want to change absolutely everything in our code, like redo everything from scratch with this new practice. And then the boss says, no. But if you say, let's try to demonstrate it within a limited time frame, then it's a completely different reaction.
Exactly.
I have to say, we did that already twice. Whenever you mention experiment, then it relieves the stress from people somehow. That they're
Yeah.
much more willing to say, yeah, let's do it for 2 weeks, a month, whatever, and see how it goes. And usually you already know that it will probably go, else you wouldn't probably
You wouldn't even try
propose
it.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh my God, it works so well. So you will continue then. So yeah, the experiment, just this word, yeah, let's do an experiment. It's like relieve stress.
Yep.
Definitely. Next one, how do you measure DORA change failure rate?
Yep. That's a good one. I find that for most organizations, the thing that's easiest to measure is deployment frequency, and it starts with that, right? You need to know all your deployments to calculate the change failure rate. So the deployment frequency, if you can measure that, you're already starting there, right? And the reason I say that's easy to measure is for very immature teams, you're not deploying very often, right? So you just know the number of Jira tickets or releases you have on your calendar. You can count them by hand. As you accelerate and get really good at this, there's a lot more automation involved, a lot more CI/CD, Spinnaker, or something like that in place, CloudBees, helping you deploy these changes. So you're going to get automated telemetry coming back. So you can build reports that tell you how often are you deploying. For change failure rate, here's an interesting, and then how do you do that and measure that and capture that? You can start, and again, you can start small. How many of the deployments we attempted actually succeeded, right? And that's an easy one to measure because we know whether the deployment got rolled back automatically or manually, or we just couldn't put it in production. You start with that. That's at least a big enough signal. And even improvements there on why did it fail help you improve your change failure rate. As you get more mature and get better at this as well, how good are you at managing and tracking your incidents and the incidents that come out in production and your incident frequency and I'm sorry, not even your incident frequency, the severity of an incident. As you mature as an organization, you start capturing more of those. And it could be in Bugsnag, it could be in Jira, it could be in tickets from customers, right? It's up to you as an organization to define what is an incident, how severe is it. As you mature in your ability to manage these incidents, you're always tracing it back to what caused it. So now you have an idea that we have this many incidents that then were caused by this many deployments. That is another signal in your change failure rate. Eventually, even further, as you start really managing all your incidents and getting really good at your incidents and tracking where they came from, you might find that incident occurs 3 weeks from now on a deployment that occurred, again, 3 weeks ago. Now, that's not very likely if you're an organization that's advanced because you're deploying frequently, right? So you would have caught it by now. So I think that's the way you start measuring it. Again, the simplest way it is of the deployments we mechanically tried to put in production, how many actually failed and couldn't deploy or immediately got rolled back?
Mm-hmm. Great points. How would you suggest dealing with the dilemma when the team is happy with the current state of things, yet you think you could do a lot better?
I've dealt with that situation many times, and I haven't always gotten it right. You run at least into two challenges there, right? One, a team that's already happy, like, why are you tinkering with it, right? They'll say, why are you tinkering with those? We're fine. But often you have to, one of the things to dig into understand, are they happy or are they complacent, right? Because sometimes people are like, I'm just comfortable. I think so. It's figuring out whether it's complacency or actually, look, very happy how we work, we're delivering, we're shipping. I think if you do things you can do a lot better, I think similar to the same idea of how you sell it to your management and your boss is how do you sell it to your team? The idea, look, it's just an experiment, something to try out. Let's test it. And I think in any team, right, this idea, this desire, and this is why I was talking about like agile and lean is there's this big aspect of continuous improvement. How are we as a team always improving, always getting better? And if you're stagnant or complacent, are you still seeking continuous improvement? Let's talk about how we continually improve. I'm not saying work harder. I'm saying work smarter, work easier, get more effective. It's all about selling these things to your team. And like I said, an easy way to sell is let's try this for 2 weeks, right? What's the biggest thing that you can lose? How bad can it be? You remove that risk, and it kind of removes that desire to fight against it.
Yes, you make the change a lot smaller instead of saying things are not good, but people might think that everything is great. Here you're actually saying what can we do better and can we try it out for a short time, and what could be the worst that could even happen by trying it out.
Exactly. Well, what do you have to lose? That's the big thing. And it's always good to understand that as a leader. What do they have to lose? Because you might not understand that and say, oh, well, let me work around that. Let me figure out how to make you feel comfortable about that thing that you think you might lose.
You're minimizing loss.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You say give the team autonomy to be motivated. Don't show them what to do and how to do it. What happens if you are convinced that they are doing things wrong or not the way you would have done it?
Yeah. That's a really good one, right? Especially when, you feel or you think you know better. So one thing is, like, I didn't say don't show them what to do. I said don't tell them what to do, right? Very different things. Showing is huge. It's massive, right? Emulating practices, emulating behaviors you want to be repeated are massive, right? So absolutely, yeah, definitely show them what to do. Just don't tell them what to do or how to do it. If they're doing things very wrong or not the way you would have done it, I think you have one of two choices. You can go into command and control mode, right, and say tell them exactly what to do. And there's sometimes that actually that's called for, right? And it's high risk situations, things that are imminent, things that have massive impact, and you need to change immediately. However, when you play that card, there's a lot that you lose along the way, and you can have big challenges, right? The other side of it is same again, is the convincing, the conversation. It's a lot of negotiation, a lot of finding motivators, a lot of thinking. And again, try this, let's test this. Here's a thing that might help. Here's where I've seen it help before. Here are other teams that are doing well. So in many ways, it's trying it. The last thing I'll say is it's not the way you would have done it. As a leader, at the end of the day, you have to get very comfortable with the idea that people will not do the way you will do things. Often, that's actually good because they learn new things and you learn new things. If everybody's doing things exactly the way you would do it, you remove that ability for, at the minimum, for you to grow and for you to learn, because someone else might have a better idea. And odds are they probably do, especially when it's a team of people. You're not smarter than your team. It's just impossible.
Exactly. And even when it comes to some technical parts, as someone goes up and up in leadership, you might have less and less hands-on experience, and these people might stay, the developers might be a lot more up to date, or maybe reading about latest practice, and it's that whole collective intelligence which is in the end stronger. And it's great how you also pointed out that there also is a place for command and control, but in a very limited space. And that's something which was also brought up in situational leadership styles, which was saying, depending on the situation and competence and motivation level of the team, that also causes adjustment of leadership styles. Of course, autonomy, giving the team autonomy, is what is long-term the best, but it might not mean that we would for every team start with autonomy, because it depends on a whole set of other factors. Because as you mentioned, if we're in a very critical situation, like if there is very high risk or very high loss that could incur, then in that case, you as a leader, if there's going to be a loss, let's say a huge financial loss, you may need to take actions to prevent that loss. Or also dealing with challenges where about, let's say, lower competence level and higher motivation. That was also a case where, let's say, in situational leadership, those kind of situations where command and control might be applied, even though, as you said, it's short term for how long you can apply it. It's not a long-term strategy.
Absolutely. And I think two things that can help you there, right? If you want to read some further on this and things that help you understand when's the right time and what does it mean. One, understanding theory X and theory Y, management and governance. Just dive into that. Is about the way we kind of look at our employees and our people. Very stark contrasting views and how we manage. But there's situations where applying theory X is better than applying theory Y. FYI, most of the time you want to be theory Y. The other thing is the Cunnivan framework. That Cunnivan framework helps you understand the ordered, the chaotic, the complicated, and the complex. At different times, different type of leadership, different type of style, different types of problem solving are required depending on where you are, what border you lay on, what border you're on.
Yeah, this is great overview. Do you think you can train people to be collaborative and communicative by opening public conversations frequently? How do you open a team that loves working in isolation? And just to add to this, if someone likes to work in silo mode and says, I'm much more productive when I work alone, I don't want to work with another pair, or I even chose software development so that I could be, alone and not have to communicate with people. Okay, this is just an extension of that question.
Yeah. So on the how to train people to be collaborative and communicative, I think there's several things you can try, right? One of them is thinking about ensuring that almost all conversations and decisions and questions happen in an open forum. For example, for saying, hey team, you know what, let's not ask each other individual questions on Slack unless it's a private question, and assume you're using Slack, every question in an open channel and tag the person. At the minimum, that makes it so that threads of context and knowledge are publicly available. So that's one thing that helps, right? I will say this now, again, it'll really rub a lot of the people who really want to work in isolation the wrong way, is like promoting ensemble programming. And teams that get really good at ensemble programming become amazing communicators because they learn how to. The hardest part is, how do I express my abstract ideas that are in my head well enough for someone else to code them? And that's a skill that you practice over and over and over and get really good at, while the other person, the driver, gets really good at listening, right? And you understand how to listen. You'll find a lot of frustrations, a lot of challenges. So you have to be very careful about how often you do it, how often you try it, when you do it, when's the right place. But teams that get good at this become amazing communicators, and their ability to communicate and becomes that much better. But that's not always the only way. I think sometimes, it becomes, important for you as a leader when you start thinking about like inclusion and the question of inclusion, right? And this expands to, usually the DEI space, diversity, equity, inclusion it's your job to proactively pull people in. You have to be listening and paying attention and seeing who's not speaking, why aren't they speaking, and elicit their feedback, elicit their involvement. And the best you can do is just try to engage and pull them in. When it comes to people who like working alone, I think often a question is, and sometimes you say, and again, that is a stereotype of engineers, right? I like working in the corner. I'm a genius, and I'm going to work by myself, and I'm not going to talk to people. When interesting enough, most of this job is talking to people and understanding what's the right problem to solve. I think it's very rare that you have that one 10x engineer, again, like the mythical unicorn of a 10x engineer that works on their own and does amazingly well in many solutions. But here's what happens when you have that amazing 10x engineer on their own. No one else is learning. That 10x engineer can only go so far by themselves. And I think, Michele was talking about this, or maybe you were talking about the idea of a congested highway and putting a Lamborghini on it. I'm like, doesn't matter how fast you are, you can't go anywhere, right? Because you're not improving the CI/CD pipeline. You're not improving other engineers. Everyone else is moving slow. You could move so much faster if you actually worked with other people, whether it's, imparting that knowledge, but also on the other side, you actually get a lot of value on improving your own skills, on refining your ideas, refining your concepts. And hey, you know what? You might be surprised that that junior engineer who knows nothing actually teaches you something. And I found that to be the case more often than not. So it's a question of really pulling them in, giving them the value, explaining that value. Sometimes you have to force them to get together. Sometimes say, look, hey, for these next 2 weeks, nothing happens except through 2 people. That's it. That's where the command and control comes in. At times, like for a limited period, to force some people to test an idea and try it. Because I think the challenge with sometimes some ideas is teams say, oh yeah, I tried it and I didn't like it. I'm like, did you actually try it? Did you actually do it? Because you can't say you dislike something unless you actually do it. At some point, the question for you as a leader is this: is it worth it for me to continue having this one person who's a 10x engineer in my team, or having a person who's a 5x engineer or less that actually works really well and brings up the level of the entire team and helps us come up with best solutions, right? What are you optimizing for? If you're optimizing for efficiency, great. If you're optimizing for productivity, great. But if you're optimizing for effectiveness, that'll never work. It'll never be effective. And that's your question. You have to think about. It's not an easy answer, right? But sometimes, like, maybe you're not the right person for this team, if that's the kind of team that I need to build.
Yes, and it comes down to are we optimizing individual performance, or are we optimizing team performance, or even higher organizational performance? Because if we're looking at it from a very simplistic, tailored perspective, then we're focused on optimizing individual performance and perhaps hiring as many 10x engineers that we can, and then we reach the limit that those people, when we do find them, that they are in very limited supply, and that they can also cause the key person risk for the company, and knowledge loss. A whole product might not be maintainable at all when that person leaves, and that's a huge business risk.
Absolutely.
So it's about risk as well then.
Yeah. And actually, I think one thing I talked about before about things that are important to learn, right? Even this question about like, coaching, and you can think about how to, at 3 things: feedback, how you think about this conversation in terms of feedback, how to provide the right feedback to this kind of person and the things that they need to continue doing better. and things they could do well, but things they also can improve on. So feedback is big. Coaching is big on helping. Maybe they don't know how to do this, right? Maybe they're just not comfortable with this, but helping coach them through how they can get better at this. And the last part is even the conversation with ikigai, right? When you help them look through what do you love doing? What are you good at? What do you get paid for, and what does the world need? What does the team need? Maybe help them work through that, and you work through that. Maybe you might find a way that gets them to pull away from that. Oh, maybe I shouldn't be working by myself, right? Like things I love are these things. It might also help that conversation.
Yes, and helping them see that their value might not be just in producing the best code individually, but in raising up others around them.
Exactly. Right. I think the important thing to remember, right? The more senior you are, doesn't mean the more you can tell people to do. It's you have a much bigger responsibility to help others. The higher you are, whether you're a staff engineer or whether you're an engineering manager or a senior director, your job is to help others. Even more so, you have a much higher burden of responsibility for helping others. And if you're not doing that, maybe you're not in the right position. You're not ready to be a leader in the team, and maybe not ready to move up that ladder, regardless whether it's an IC ladder or a management ladder.
And
Wow.
I also think that lots of people just need a push sometimes.
Yeah,
Sometimes they're just used to, also with all this home office stuff, you just get used to not go out, not to talk to people, and then you just work by your own. But sometimes you just need to push them, work together, and you notice it after some minutes, you just open up, and then all of a sudden it's so much fun to work together. And also people that never talk to anybody is like, yeah, okay, now I take over, I program now, or I show you something, and then you get to know the people much better than before. Actually,
Yeah.
it's like when you just work as a team, a real team.
Exactly.
So we could say even that the value of a leader is helping a team who is not a team become a team by giving them an environment, even if it means short-term command and control, like saying, have to work together or something like that to get those benefits.
Yeah.
Okay. Now for the next comments that I will show, it was a dialogue which was motivated by some of the points that were discussed. So I will just quickly show each of the comments. Of course, if you have anything additional, you can comment on top of it. So this was about losing the trust of a client means to lose the client. And that was that cost that you mentioned before, and sometimes even more. So it's not just losing the client, but maybe you can even lose reputation in the industry, or not get referrals. 2 features, 1 chore plus XP practices work. Then there was some discussion. Ship product and wait for feedback is very important. How can we have that in a fresh startup that have no or few customers? This might even be then a question or discussion point.
Yeah, now that's a new one. That's a discussion point.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. In a startup, it's especially important to be able to get that feedback, right? That's, lean startup, build, validate, learn, right? In a startup, right? What is a startup? The startup is an enterprise looking for a business model, for a business model that actually works, right? So a startup is exploring ideas, exploring and testing whether this thing works. The faster you can ship product to gain feedback, not because you want to get it out there, right? I want to give out, but to gain feedback, the faster you can actually make sure you're building the right thing and solving the right problem. You might often find that you'll pivot 5 times and like, oh, now I found the real problem. I thought I was solving this one. So even if you have no or few customers, I mean, the question is like, if you have no customers, what kind of validation did you do ahead of time? Like, does anybody really need this, right? Sometimes people have great ideas, but if nobody wants to buy this, is this the right thing to build? I think there's an aspect of, and this soft research, there's qualitative research, there's interviews, there's people, just talk to people who you think this is their problem and try to find them and talk about, is this the right problem to solve? And then you work on trying to solve, ship something that seems to fix that problem and validate with them, actually have the conversation. I'm not even talking about big data because you won't have big data. Have the conversation. Does this make your life better? How does it make it better? Does it not make it better? If not, what else do you need? Great, go. So the more you can put stuff in front of your users, the more you can actually get that feedback and figure out what to do next. Otherwise, you'll end up building something that nobody wants, and you just wasted everybody's time.
And some people do that when they spend a year building an MVP with 0 customers and then putting it out on the market and then discovering that no one wants to buy it.
Exactly.
Okay, these are some additional comments, which again, I think were motivated by previous talks. Do not talk about the practice talk, but instead talk about the pains and make them visible. So this is about talking in the business language.
Yep, exactly. What pains is causing the team? What pains is causing the business?
Yeah, and the other point that you also previously talked about is that the situation where the team or the company has fears and that we need to make a relationship of trust. So that was the part where I like how you talked about if the boss doesn't support something, it could be just that they have a fear or loss, and then you need to understand someone's motivation, how to overcome the fear.
Yep. And again, trust is massive, right? And I think that's what I was talking a little bit about. How do you build your credibility, your ability to understand, like, hey, I've solved this before. I know how to solve this. I've experienced. Trust, have some trust in me and confident. You hired me for a reason. But I think there's another aspect, and I'll be the first to say that, I've messed this up in the past, right? You also need the trust of your team. And building trust takes a long time. It's not just about skill. I think there's a big part of the emotional intelligence piece, right?
Yes.
Understanding people, listening to yourself. And at the end of the day, they need to feel psychological safety. We're in the same boat. I'm there for you when you need me, and we're in this together. That is crucial in order to try anything new, building that trust. And like I said, I'll be the first to say I failed at this sometimes by moving too fast, by being too command control, taking too long, right? Or not spending enough time investing in building that trust. And it requires investing, building that trust in every direction, to your bosses, to your people, all the way around.
Definitely, because if someone has the trust foundation, then anything that you say will be perceived differently compared to the case where someone does not have any trust in you.
Exactly.
So it's not about the idea or how good is the idea, but what's your current trust level, and also how do you communicate it.
Yeah, you lose the trust and respect very quickly if you just crash into the team and say, yeah, we do it now like that. And they're like, yeah, no.
Exactly.
And that is what happens sometimes when there's like 10x engineer who comes in and says, okay, everyone, you're all doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And then
cool. Nobody's going to want to work with you.
Yeah. And similar thing for a leader. Next one. Okay.
We saw that one before.
This was the one which we already talked about. How do you see manual QA? This question always comes up, fitting in with DORA metrics and deployment frequency increasing, or alternatively adding to this, what's the value of the QA in there, and what happens if someone thinks, will I still have my job?
Yeah. So manual QA always has value, meaning, look, no matter how good our technology and our solutions and our robots are, humans are still superior at finding new things, new patterns, new ways of breaking things, right? So there's an aspect of manual QA is important primarily from an exploratory perspective, right? And I think that's massive. Like, there's no way to really explore with the bots, at least not yet. So that's where I think manual QA applies its biggest value, if that's the way you're testing. Eventually, though, and actually, no, not even eventually, at a foundation, you cannot increase deployment frequency with manual QA. It's impossible. You need to automate QA, automate testing. That doesn't mean that you've done all the testing, and doesn't mean automation is your only testing, right? Like I said, testing is primarily around increasing your confidence that you haven't broken anything. Manual QA, and when you think about exploratory, helps catch those corner cases that you never thought about. Obviously, those are stuff in production that you're never going to find in a low environment. So that's what I can say about where manual QA fits into DORA mesh deployment frequency. Is like, if that's the only way you're testing, you're never going to get there. It's never going to happen. It's impossible. But it's critical and it's necessary. Where I do think a manual QA asking that question on where do I fit in the future, I think in many ways it's how do you think quality assistance. I think Atlassian talked about this years ago. Is like, your job is to help the rest of the team really think about quality and quality from every direction. How do you, as a team member who's an expert in quality, can increase the level of quality across the entire team? What can you do to help promulgate the right practices, the best practices around how we're designing, how we're thinking, how we're coding, and what kind of automated tests to cover as part of my development process? There you can add a massive amount of value as a QA. But by manually testing, that's, you're selling yourself short if you think that's the only way you add value, and eventually you're going to be out of a job. It's just going to happen.
I like the directness of the response, and especially how you said there's no way any team is going to decrease. There's no way a team can increase deployment frequency if they have manual QA, because it's not scalable. Whereas automated regression testing is scalable. I think that the picture is frozen. I'm not sure if we can still hear you. Let's see. I will go on to the next question. So maybe Oliver, we could discuss it whilst Ariel comes back. How would you change an organization that is focused on tech and practices, but not into knowing the domain or business logic? So I would say that this question is about the case where the only focus seems to be on technology, but not on the domain. So yeah, maybe you could share your experiences there as well.
But this is a really hard. I mean, I don't know if you can actually run an organization where you don't focus on the business logic or the business domain. I mean, is this meant for only the tech team? I mean, if even the business people think, oh no, we don't care about the domain, we only focus on tech and practices. So I assume it's probably about the tech team, and there probably my go-to thing would actually be to get to know the people, get to know the business people that are involved in this in your domain. Talk to them, do some domain-driven design, event storming stuff to actually build the same trust. So for me, it's actually very similar to ensemble programming, where you actually just
I didn't know.
Hi, Ariel. Okay, thanks. Thanks for
it didn't
coming
even
back.
tell me it was gonna die.
Yeah,
It literally just shut off on me.
Okay, good that you came back on.
Yep.
So here, sorry Oliver for the interruption. So yeah, here I guess we'll continue now with Ariel regarding how would you change an organization that is focused on tech and practices, but not into knowing the domain or business logic.
I've seen that before. It's a challenge. I think going back to the idea of motivators, about the things that people are scared about and concerned about it, I often find, for engineers and technical organizations, it can be very easy to be like, I want to live in my happy space. I'm comfortable in this space. I know this space, technology. I don't want to creep into the business side because I feel out of place. I feel out of context. That's one thing, right? Could be it. Trying to find that out. It might be motivations where they've been basically slapped in the hand in the past, right? Where like, look, that's not your job. Your job is tech. That's product's job. It might be places where, and this happens way too often, where they're so separated from business and product, and at the end they're a feature factory and they're just coding all the specs. They get that. They don't even know where to begin to think about where to start. So there's all this stuff underlying it before you can even talk about, well, why don't you want to change? Why don't you, it's like, do you even desire to? Have you ever tried to? So there's that part, figuring it out, right? Assuming you figure all that out, right? I think at the end of the day is a question of a challenge of, and potentially finding data on how often did you come up with a solution that was suboptimal, that didn't solve the right business problem because you had no clue about the feature. How much time are you spending, which on the plus side, have more conversations with product, right? One of the Agile principles, we do this through customer collaboration and conversations, right? Not written tickets. A story is a promise for a conversation. That's good. You're having conversations with product, but how often are you finding yourself spending times writing detailed ACs, acceptance criteria, detailed specs, detailed, product requirements documents, and all this time documenting and writing stuff because you have zero context. And now you have to spend the time reading that and understanding, going back and forth and asking questions. How much time do you spend doing that, right? Is that the most valuable use of your time? Or is it literally you sitting in the table with your product owner and the customer and having the conversations like, okay, I know what you want. I know what you want. I understand your problem. I can build a solution for that, right? Just think about the effectiveness, and fine. Let's talk about productivity and efficiency. Think about the efficiency of that, right? But at the end of the day, you become much more effective because you can much more quickly solve the right problem, right? And if you as a tech organization want to solve the right problem, then let's have that conversation. Let's do it. If you don't, it's very challenging. And do I still want to be here or not? That's also very challenging as well.
Yeah. So in the end, it comes to business value. Essentially, without understanding the domain or business logic, there's no way that we can generate any business value.
We can, right? But is it going to be the right thing? Is it going to be how often are we going to have the right thing solved, and how often are we going to be literally wasting time just translating, playing a game of telephone?
Exactly, like just a low return on investment.
Yep.
And since we're close to the end, also one closing general question, especially since you're VP of measurement and learning, and you talked a lot about metrics as well. How would you describe the journey for, let's say, an organization or team which initially has, scores really low on the DORA metrics? So deployment is almost never, maybe once several months. The lead for changes is also really, really high. So, it's very slow to get any business value into production. There's a high change failure rate. So every time we do deployment, there's always so many breakages, including production critical breakages and stress. And that it also takes us a lot of time to recover from failure. So let's say, suppose that we're starting at complete zero, like the worst, lowest metrics. How to go from zero to hero in your perspective?
I'm going to make it very simple and say three things, and the third one will be a cop out, but it'll also be a marketing ploy. The first one is make everything smaller. Break everything into smaller pieces, smaller chunks, lower risk, lower time to test it, to validate it, to ship it. So make everything as small as possible. And if you think it's small enough, make it even smaller. One commit, ship one commit, right? So break everything smaller. The second one is work as a team. It helps you really solve problems much more deeply, much more effectively, and much more thoroughly. You'll probably get a lot less production issues if you had your whole team looking at this one thing, this one small thing, right? And if you keep looking at one small thing as a team, every one of those one small things will probably have less fires in production. You'll probably get them out faster. And it'll be easier to resolve if there's an issue because the whole team knows it. The third one is, and this is the cop out, which is a broad umbrella, focus on technical excellence, right? The things that'll help you be, what does technical excellence mean? And again, we can look through all of your videos, right? But think about how you increase the practices and the focus on what it means to have technical excellence, because those things make your life so much easier as an engineer. At the end of the day, it pays off massively if you actually pay attention to what it means to be technically excellent.
I like how you put that one as the third point, because the first two are the very common answers that people would give, teamwork and break things. But in the end, I mean, technical excellence is the foundation. And let's say, suppose we want to go from zero technical excellence to like hero level technical excellence. What do you see as the progression? Like, what's the first level of technical excellence, and as we go up, what are the levels? I know this is a bit of an abstract question.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is necessarily the right order, right? I haven't really thought about this deeply, but improving your test-driven development practices, right? Even if it is right, test last, fine. That's a starting point.
Exactly.
You'll eventually start finding where you run into challenges with that, right? So you might eventually move to test first. So I think test-driven development is massive, massive in terms of improving your quality, but more importantly, ensuring you're building the right things and then not breaking them later when you change something. So test-driven development, massive. Automation across the board, right? Test-driven development fits into automation, but what do I mean by automation? Your pipeline, CI/CD. So how do you get better at even if it's one change and ship that change and don't test anything, starting building the outer rails of your pipeline are massive. So automating your ability to put things in production. So, and CI/CD is a massive umbrella, right? But let's say that. Take it a step further, then great. How do you continue improving on that? Well, maybe improving your observability and monitoring in production, right? How are you using your logs? How are you tracking your logs? Where are you putting alerts? What things are important? If you really don't know what to track in prod, red helps, right? Red is your error, your request rate. At E is your error rate, and the first one request throughput, and the D is your duration, your latency. Measure latency, measure response time, measure your error rate. Just start there. Those are things engineers tend to understand, and start monitoring those in production. Take it a step further. I have my pipeline, I have my TDD, I have my production. Let me start filling in the middle. Start moving to trunk-based development, right? Don't even bother with Git flow. Don't bother with with the branches. Start moving to trunk-based development. Before that, I need to start using feature flags. So let me get very comfortable with feature flags, so I can feature flag everything, merge always, merge often, and then in production, turn them on independently. So feature flags as a practice, trunk-based development really helps you ship often. Then you start expanding from there on. What other kinds of automated testing? What kinds of integration testing do I need? What kinds of E2E testing do I need? Do I use Gherkin? Do I use Cucumber? Do I use Cypress? Honestly, at a high level, I don't care. Just start with one of them and practice that muscle. And then, lastly, I'll say, things like, hexagonal architecture really help, right? Thinking about your ports, your adapters, your business logic, your domain logic, your application layer, your integration layer, thinking about how to break your solutions into those pieces and why you do those. That's important. And so you stick with that as well. So that's a broad, a few particular things, but I think all those can increment and build upon each other.
That's an excellent overview. It's great how you started off with the word test as first part of the response, because we can't get to any code quality or better code or refactoring without tests, and we also can't achieve CI without tests. So tests are mathematically, logically, the very first thing that needs to be done regardless. And I also do recommend, when someone is firstly starting out, do test last. I think the TDD is too much of a big step. So I always also with teams start with test last before moving to TDD at all. And then when we have those tests, at least we've satisfied one of the minimal criteria for CI, alongside the other one of trunk-based development. Okay, so now that we have that CI, and that part handles technical excellence of the moment of development until delivery. And then the next point that you mentioned was observability, which is okay, what happens after we deliver in production, and then extending more towards the whole architecture topic. Okay, how do we modularize and that whole separation between business logic and infrastructure. So yeah, this was really, really enjoyable. And now we also have some thank you notes as well from our audience. So thank you for the talk and all the answers. It was very interesting and insightful.
Thanks for the questions.
Yeah, they were great, definitely. Thanks a lot. We had quite a lot of questions today. The other one was just a comment. I find the fastest way to get user feedback is to build dynamic UI prototypes with Figma or equivalent. So that's yet another way of getting early feedback.
And it's low cost.
Yeah, and it's better than going into software development, which is a magnitude more costlier.
Yeah.
I think that there is a lot of assumption in the industry about teams being collaborative. We don't talk much about individual interactions, and indeed, quite often everyone talks about teams, but there's not that many who actually achieved teamwork. Another thank you.
Welcome.
Another thank you. Thanks for all your points about team collaboration. Really valuable. I will echo Oliver. Push sometimes is needed to further improve, and also additional thank you here as well. So yeah, I think everyone enjoyed it, and we received quite a lot of questions and feedback. So I think that this ties on with the big idea of continuous feedback. I also personally really liked this session. A lot of others were purely about some technical aspects of how to achieve technical excellence, but what is often ignored is leadership aspect. But
Absolutely.
actually, it's the engineering leaders who are supposed to build this culture to help move these things forward. So I also want to say from outside as well, thank you. Like, this was really great synthesis of both the product and the technical side, and how you linked quality to net present value and everything else.
My pleasure. This has been great. Thank you for having me. Hope I can have another talk again in the next year about maybe something more deeply technical, right? But this is the part that I'm very, if you can see, you haven't noticed, I'm very passionate about this topic.
Yes, definitely. I think it's good when someone really cares. And the other thing is also for all of our viewers in the audience. Some of you are leaders, or maybe speaking with your leaders, or want to find how to push technical excellence within your team, within your company. So I'm sure that you can take many ideas from this presentation and then apply it in real life. So thanks again, everyone, and we wish you a great day. So see you next time.